Here's a juicy question to get us started this morning. What makes a sin a sin? I'm sure it's a question that many of us have pondered at some point, one time or another. You know, maybe you're outside of the Christian faith. Maybe you're trying to figure out where you stand on all of this religion thing and Jesus thing and God thing. And maybe you've asked this question, thought, well, what makes a sin a sin? Maybe you thought, who gives Christians the right to be able to say, well, this is a sin and this isn't a sin? And actually thinking about that for somebody who's within the Christian faith and the Christian worldview, actually when we take a moment and take ourselves out and look at it from the outside, there's some things that are part of our traditions and our cultures that actually can be obstacles for people looking in on the outside. And this is one of them. You know, who gives us the right to say this is sin and that's not sin and create all of these the lists of things? Maybe you're inside the Christian faith. Maybe you've grown up in church or you've been following Jesus for a long time and you're still asking yourself that question because you want to know where the line is. You want to know, if I want to be a faithful follower of Jesus, what can I do and what can't I do? What's okay and what's not okay? Well, that's exactly what we're going to look at this morning. And, many of us grew up in homes, in good homes where our parents set rules for us and they said that this is okay, this is how you behave and this is what you're not allowed to do. Things like not eating in the lounge maybe, or no shoes on in the hall, on the sofas. And as you got older, those rules sort of changed and they grew. Things like where you could go or with whom you could go, what time you had to be back, what you could watch on TV, all of these things. And the thing for me when I was growing up, invariably I broke these rules. I'd try and push the boundaries and see what I could get away with. And when I broke one of these house rules that was in our family, the opening line that my parents would say to me was often along the lines of, how many times do I have to tell you? How many times do I have to tell you about this? And the point is, they've told me. The point is, they've set out, look, this, Chris, is what we expect of you. These are the ground rules. This is the framework for how we want you to live and how we want to get on as a family. And when I broke the rules, it wasn't because I didn't know what they were. That's why I say, how many times have I had to tell you? My parents wanted to be clear. They were good parents. They wanted me to know what was expected of me. They weren't secret rules. They weren't trying to trip me up. They weren't trying to catch me out. Those rules were there to help me stay safe. They were there to help us as a family function and get on together. In our country, we have a legal system which functions in a similar way. We have a bunch of rules that we're expected to follow. Those rules are called laws, and those laws are there, generally speaking, to help us stay safe, to help us as a society function well together. And when we know what those laws are, we know what those rules are in general. They're not there to trip us up. They're not there to catch us out. They're there to keep us safe. They're there to help us all function and thrive in our society. But when somebody breaks one of these laws, when somebody breaks one of your, if you break one of your house rules, the judge or your parents don't call you a sinner, do they? They don't say, you've done that, you've broken one of these rules, you're a sinner. That's because the word sin is a religious word. It's associated with religion. And we use that title of a sinner to describe somebody who's broken one of those rules. Put your hands up if, no, don't do that. That's not, but that's this thing. We're talking about the same concept, but we're talking about these rules and these laws that are there to help us stay safe, to help us function well. But we associate this word sin or a sinner to somebody who breaks these religious rules. And the thing is, if good parents work hard to make it clear for us that we know what the rules are, and if good governments work hard to make it clear that these are the laws and this is what's expected of you, what about God? What about Jesus? Was Jesus clear about what the laws are? Was Jesus clear about what the rules are? Is Jesus clear about where the line is? Did Jesus help us clarify what's sin and what's not? If Jesus has a bunch of house rules and that's what we call sin, Is he clear with us on, well, this is what they are? Has he set out that framework? Has he made it a mystery and made them difficult for us to fathom and work out? Or is he a good God? Is he a good king and actually helped us establish what those things are? This is really important. What's sin and what's not. It's important for all of us, wherever we are on this journey of faith. If you're a follower of Jesus, you want to know what is sin and what's not, because you want to be a faithful follower of Jesus. You want to know what's in and what's out, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Where is the line when it comes to my attitude, my actions, my thoughts, my behaviors, all those things. So actually thinking about what Jesus has said here is really important. But if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you're someone who's curious about faith or even skeptical about faith, actually knowing what's sin and what's not is important, because it helps you understand what is following Jesus for me or isn't it? What are the ground rules? What's the framework? What has God set out as the expectation for me as somebody who wants to follow him? If Jesus is a good leader, surely he is clear about what sin is and what sin isn't. And he is. And we're going to explore that this morning as part of our fundamental list series. We're trying to rediscover the essentials of our faith. This series is all about helping us understand, well, what must someone believe in order to be a faithful follower of Jesus? What must someone believe? There's so many things that come into the Christian faith. And there's lots of things that are central, that are foundational, that are primary. That's the stuff that we want to look at in these series. These things are essential. They are core. They are central to the Christian faith. Even though the Christian faith is split into many different denominations and different ways of doing things. In week one, we talked about the 45,000 different denominations. That's 45,000 different ways to approach the same thing. And pretty much all of those denominations came out of a disagreement. People thought, well, you're doing something, or you're believing something, or you're acting something in a way that we disagree with, so we're going to set up our own way. In all of that sort of culture and that tradition, how do we know what is foundational? How do we know what is central? And how do we know what's peripheral? How do we know what's cultural? How do we know what's traditional? How do we know those things that are on the edges? Not that they're not important. I mean, some of those things aren't important. Some of the things that we bring in here can be harmful. We want to be aware of those things. So we want to know what's foundational and what's peripheral, what's cultural. And we've done 2 weeks of this already. You can catch up on our YouTube channel or at the Hub. You can find the videos from the previous sessions. And the first thing on our fundamental list is Jesus is God's Son and our King. And this is so important. That's right at the beginning. Everything else that we're going to look at throughout this series flows from this fundamental principle. This is what Jesus claimed about himself. And if we want to be faithful followers of Jesus, we have to believe about him what he believed he is. So Jesus believed that he was God's son. He believed that he was God's final king, that he is our king. And as God's final king, Jesus came to illustrate and demonstrate what God is like. Roger talked us through this last week. Jesus is God in a bod. The Bible is, or the Gospels, the first 4 books in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, sort of tell us these biographical accounts of Jesus. They're not Bible stories. They're witness accounts. They're historical documents that are telling us who Jesus is and what Jesus said and what Jesus did. And the big thing about Jesus is he revealed to us who God is. He revealed to us what God is like. That question, who is God, is being answered. It's not a mystery for us because we know who God is through the person of Jesus. And Jesus himself said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He claimed to be God. He is God in a bod. And we're going to carry on from that. We're going to build on that as we jump into our third thing on our fundamental principle this morning. And to help us discover that, we need to understand, how did Jesus characterize sin? The king sets the rules. So what rules did he set? And Jesus was very clear about this. The problem is his followers haven't always been. And part of the reason why there's confusion about what's sin and what isn't and all of those things is because we often handle Scripture, we handle the Bible in a different way to Jesus did. Now, the Bible didn't exist at Jesus' time, but the Scriptures existed. And this thing in my hand is not a book. And you're looking at me like I've lost the plot, because of course it is a book. It's got a beginning and end and a cover, but it's it's not. It's a collection of 66 different books. And because of the advancement in technology and the invention of the printing press, we were able to print all of these 66 different scriptures together and put them in one place, and to put a handy, helpful cover around them to keep them safe so that we could carry them around. But the problem is, now we think this is a book, we think everything within this is the same, and we think everything within this is equal, that is, it has equal weighting and it has equal inspiration and has equal importance. You know, we might believe, that all of Scripture is inspired, it says that about itself. But does it mean it's all equally important, or does it mean it's all equally weighted? And the reality is that actually, no, it doesn't. All of Scripture isn't equally weighted. And those of us who've grown up in church might start to feel a bit uncomfortable, because we've been taught and we've been told, well, the Bible is the inspired word of God. I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm suggesting is that there are bits of Scripture that actually carries more weight, that actually there's bits that helps us interpret and make sense of the rest. And I'm not actually saying this. Jesus said this first. So we're going to take a look at that. We're actually going to jump around a few New Testament passages to help us understand, what does Jesus mean when he talks about sin? How did Jesus characterize sin? And so we're going to look at something that a guy called Matthew recorded for us first of. And this, if you've been in church any length of time, you know this. These words are familiar. You could probably recite them by heart. And the challenge in that is that often in familiarity, we can miss the stuff that's going on in that. If you haven't grown up in church, if you're new to faith, if you're curious about faith, you might not come across this stuff. You're in a great position to hear that for the first time and actually see what Jesus is saying about that. So let's jump in to that. So this guy comes up to Jesus, and this is actually a trick question. He says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" There's over 600 commandments in the Jewish tradition, including the top 10, the 10 commandments. All were important. But this guy asked Jesus, which one is the most important? What's the go-to commandment? What's the mega commandment? What's the one to hold on to, the one not to forget? And Jesus answers. He says this. Jesus replied, "No one commandment is more important than all the other, than the other. All commands are equal in importance and greatness." Jesus didn't say that. But the fact that he didn't say that speaks volumes. Jesus didn't question the question. Jesus didn't say to the guy who asked this question about what's the greatest commandment, he didn't say, well, that's a silly question, because all of the commandments are equal in importance. All of the commandments are equal in weighting. He doesn't. He answers the question. And the reason he answers the questions means that he thinks the question is valid. He thinks the question is important. He thinks the question is worth exploring. And this is what Jesus actually said. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And if you've been in church any length of time, you know this. You've read this. You've heard us speak about this so many times. Jesus answers the question. This is the mega commandment. This is the most important. This is the one that has the most weighting. And he says this is the first and greatest. This word first means first in sequence, in that actually there's going to be some others that follow this. And he continues because he gives them the next one. He says the second is like it. And this is an interesting thing that he carries on, because the guy asked, what's the greatest commandment, not what are the greatest commandment. He was expecting one. But Jesus said, well, this is the first in sequence, and the second is like it. He gives the second in this sequence of the greatest commandments. And the challenge with the first, love God with everything you've got, is basically what Jesus is saying, quoting from Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. The challenge is, how do you know you're doing it? Or how do you know somebody else is doing it? How do you know you're loving God with everything you've got? How do you know you're loving him with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind? Well, that's where the second comes in. He says the second's like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. These are Jesus's top house rules. These are the things that are really important to him. And he's basically telling us that you do this one, you love your neighbor as yourself. When you do that, you fulfill the first, you fulfill the mega commandment. The way that you love God with everything you have is by loving your neighbor as yourself. You cannot love God if you don't love the person who is standing in front of you. Now, this is amazing what Jesus is saying, because one, he's saying, actually all of the commands are not equal, that actually there are some that are more important, there's some that have more weighting than others. And he takes this one that you can't really argue with. Yes, of course, the guy was probably expecting Jesus to say something along the lines of, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and all your mind. But then he says, look, this is how you do it. The second is like it, has the same importance. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is amazing. But what Jesus says next is actually shocking, but also clarifying. He says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. What Jesus means by all the law and the prophets is what we would think of as the Bible. At Jesus' time, the Old Testament scriptures that we have in the first bit of our Bibles was already formed. It was always already grouped together. And the law and the prophets, that Jesus is referring to the scriptures at the time. He's saying all of this, and actually I think we can add the New Testament into that as well, saying all of this hangs on these two commands. Love God with everything you have and love your neighbor as yourself. All of this is hanging off those two commands. You know, all of this is interpreted through these two commands. All of this, that's the lens, that's the filter through which we make sense, through which we understand the rest. Now, hold that thought as we jump into something else that Jesus said. Now, Mark's recording this for us, another one of the Gospels. It says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along, and they began to pick some heads of grain. And the Pharisees are a group of people who are very religious. They know the laws. They know these 600 commands, and they live them out religiously. They focus. They're good people in the sense of they know what the laws are, and they stick to them. And so the Pharisees said to Jesus, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? Now, there's laws about, so the Sabbath is the day of rest. It's a Saturday. In our culture, sometimes we think of it as a Sunday. And there's laws about what you can do and what you can't do. And the principle of the Sabbath is about, rest and rhythm of life. And you're not allowed to work. And these disciples are walking through, maybe they're hungry, they're through this field, and they're just picking the heads of these grains off. And the Pharisees are saying, well, you're breaking the law because you're harvesting, and harvesting is work, and work is not allowed on the Sabbath. They're saying, look, why are they doing what is lawful or unlawful on the Sabbath? And they're right. They are breaking the law. But the Pharisees have missed the point. They've missed the reason why the Sabbath laws are there. They're there to help us. They're not there to hinder us. They're there to ensure that we get adequate rest and we can recuperate and we can have healthy rhythms of life. And Jesus' response to them was, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. What came first? The law or people? God didn't, sit up in heaven and create a list of laws and then think, we've got a problem. There's nobody to live according to these laws. So I know what I'll do. I'll create humankind so that there are people to follow my laws. No, that's not how it worked. It'd be a crazy thing first. Humankind came first, and then the law was introduced as a way to help us live together and to keep safe. God didn't create people so that he'd have someone to keep his law. The laws were given to help people. The law was given to keep people safe. And what we can see from this, what we can see from the thing that Jesus has already said about the greatest commandment is people are the priority. We see from the greatest commandment and from this debate over the law that according to Jesus, people are the priority. And if we follow this train of thought through, we can say that anyone who applies the law of God in a way that harms people is not applying it correctly. Anybody who takes the law that's written out in these commands and applies it, and the outcome of that application of the law is that it hurts somebody, it harms somebody, well, you're not applying the law correctly. And what happens when we focus on the law without recognizing the reason for it or the purpose of it, we can become very religious, just like the Pharisees, and it's all about following a bunch of rules and regulations, and it's not about actually being faithful followers of Jesus. And this is exactly what the Pharisees were doing. Jesus' house rules are there to help us. They're not there to hinder us. They're not there to harm us. And when we focus on these rules and we forget the people for who these rules were given, we miss the point and we can easily misuse them. Let me give you another example. So Matthew's recording this for us. Somebody comes up to Jesus and says, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? You know, this is an awful question to ask, but somebody asked this question, and it's the sort of question that you ask when you're more concerned about a rule than you are about a person. It's a question that you ask when you're more concerned about following and observing the law than you are about the reason or the why behind this. And you know what? I'm sure you've asked this question. Well, maybe not this question, but you've asked a question that's similar to the question. I'm sure maybe at one point or another you've asked, does the Bible say, fill in the blank, is a sin? I'm sure at some point you've asked that or you pondered that. Does the Bible say this is a sin? And if we're really honest, the reason we ask this question, whether we ask it out loud or we ask it in ourselves, is because we want to do blank, or we want to convince somebody else to do blank. So we say, does the Bible say that? And when we think like this, our assumption is if the Bible doesn't condemn it, then God must condone it. I mean, what a flawed logic that is. That logic only works if our goal is to follow a bunch of rules. That logic only works if our goal is to follow the law. But that's not what it's about. Following Jesus isn't about following a bunch of rules. Following Jesus is about constantly and consistently living our lives in reference to him. Following Jesus is about following this person, our King, and trying to live our lives as he would if he was in our situation. If we were trying to find rules for every aspect of life, we're going to struggle because there's nothing in the Bible about the internet. There's nothing in the Bible about a whole bunch of things. And if we're just trying to find, well, it doesn't say anything, so then I'm good to go, we've missed the point. And that's not what following Jesus is about. It's not about religion. It's not about doing this, and this in order. It's about fixing our eyes upon the person of Jesus, acknowledging him that he is God's son and he is our King. And we try and live our lives in reference to him. And so according to Jesus, what's good for people, what is really good for people is what's good. If you want to know what is good, it's the things that are good for the people around you. And if you want to know what's not good, it's the things that are not good for the people around you. And so Jesus is talking about this, and he's sort of trying to set out this stall and push back against this religious nature. And Jesus does not condone people who follow the rules, just like the Pharisees, but hurt people. Let's look at something else that Jesus says. He says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give a tenth of your spices. Let's just pause it there. I'd love to say, woe to you. This is an indictment that he's saying. He's giving them a warning, some phrase that he's saying. And he's calling them, they're hypocrites. You're doing this, but you're missing something out. Now, they were following the law. There's a law about giving a tenth of your spices and tenth of other things. These were things that they were doing. They were faithfully following the rules. But Jesus doesn't say, well done, you teachers of the laws and Pharisees, because you're keeping the law. He says, no, woe to you, because you do this, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law. Now, in case you haven't picked up on it yet, Jesus says that not all laws are equal. That actually there's some weighting, that there's some more important. Yeah, giving a tenth of your spices is part of the law, and there's a whole thing about dependency on God and honoring God and those sort of things, and sharing and helping other people. You've done that, but you've neglected the more important aspects of the law. You're focusing on what the law is rather than why it is. And in doing that, you're actually breaking it. Get your head around this. You can break the rules by following the rules, according to Jesus. You can focus on the things that it says do this and don't do that. But if you focus on that, on the what, and forget the why and the bigger picture, you can actually break the law or break the rules that God has for you. He says, woe to you. We go through that. Where are you? You've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You know, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. This is more important than just following that law about giving a tenth of your spices. This is what matters most to our Heavenly Father. And it's what should matter most to us. That actually focusing on justice, focusing on mercy, focusing on faithfulness. And actually, if we do those things, these other bits in the law actually work their way out. That we still continue to be faithful to the God. We still give him the things that we should give to him. So Jesus, this is a bunch of stuff. We jumped around a whole bunch of New Testament passages or passages from the gospel just to try and set out the stall and answer this question. What makes a sin a sin? Well, I came across these 4 statements that I think serve us as helpful reminders. If we want to know, well, what is sin and what isn't a sin? If we want to know what to do and what not to do, let me just lead you through these 4 statements. If it's not good for him, it's a sin. If it's not good for her, defer. If it's not good for you, no can do. And if it's not good for them, it should be condemned. I like the rhyming in that. Hopefully you can see the point of this. If you're doing something that is harmful to you or you around you, the people around you, it's not good. And actually, we shouldn't do that. The answer is no. If actually this thing and thinking, well, is that okay? And the result of it is it's harmful to somebody else or it's harmful to you. The answer is no. It is not okay. If it's not good for you or the yous around you, then it is not loving to God and it's not loving your neighbor as yourself. It's not loving the person against you. And Jesus speaks a lot about this. God talks a lot about this. So much of the Old Testament is about setting out these rules for healthy living. And the thing is that God is against sin. He's massively against sin. Jesus is against sin. Have you ever wondered why God is against sin? It's because he's for you. This is very different from the message that the religious people and the religious leaders at the time of Jesus. There was this religious model that says when you sin, you break God's law. Yes, that's true. When you sin, you do break God's law. They're correct. But they've missed the point. And Jesus approached this in an entirely different way. The Jesus model is when you sin, you break yourself and you break others, which breaks God's heart. The reason why God is so anti-sin is because he is so for you, and he cannot stand it when we do things that harm ourselves, and he cannot stand it when we do things that harm other people, and he cannot stand it when we take his word or his laws or his rules and we apply them in a way that hurts or hinders somebody else. The law was created for the people. The law was there to help them, not to harm them. Sin is the opposite. Sin harms us. Sin gets in the way. Sin not only hurts you, but it hurts the people around you. When we get caught in patterns of habitual sin or repeated actions that we know are not good for us, it damages ourselves, but it also damages the people who are closest to us. They can see what we're doing, and it hurts them. It causes them pain and suffering as well. And the whole point of this, if we want to be faithful followers of Jesus, we need to avoid sin. But the way we avoid sin is we don't avoid sin by following a bunch of rules. We avoid sin by following Jesus. We avoid sin by faithfully following Jesus. We avoid sin by trying to live our lives in reference to Jesus, by thinking, well, what would you say? What would you think? What would you do if you were in my shoes, if you were facing what I was facing? If you were tempted with what I'm tempted with, what would you do? And then we do the same. That is how we follow Jesus. So we can add this to our fundamental list. So we've got Jesus is God's Son and our King. We've got Jesus came to illustrate and demonstrate what God is like. And the third thing is Jesus defines sin as anything that harms you or others. We're going to get the band up on stage as we just take a moment to think about the so what of all of this. So let me ask you this challenging question. Are you harming you or others? So challenging question. Be honest with yourself. Right now, are you stuck in a habit, an attitude, a prejudice, a relationship, an action, a thought pattern that you know is harming you or it's harming somebody else? If so, stop it. Stop it. Perhaps it is a habit that's not good for you, whatever it is. And we could spend ages listing out, all these sins, lying, stealing, cheating, supporting Man United, all of these things. Is that right? Stop it. It's not good for you or the people around you. Are you in a relationship that has the potential to damage you or to damage somebody else? Have you got an attitude that leads to actions that are harmful, again, for you or for somebody else? It causes you to do things that aren't good for you. And maybe it might make you feel good for a small period of time, but in the end, you're left feeling worthless. You're left feeling that you're just not good enough. You're left feeling just empty and dry and dirty and full of shame and guilt. Whatever it is, you know what it is. Are you harming you or others? And if the answer to that question is yes, do you have the courage to leave your sin? Are you able and willing to follow Jesus away from your sin? Not because you're breaking God's law, but because you're breaking you, or you're breaking somebody around you, and that's breaking God's heart. And it's not good for you. It's not good for them. And maybe for a period of time, I need to change this, what I think about this. I need to change what I say. I need to change what I do in that. And perhaps it's already breaking you. Perhaps you're already feeling that, and that weight is upon you, and just the stuff that comes with that. I've been there. I'm sure we've all been there. We've all had those moments when we think, we say, we do something that we regret, and then we're full of shame, and we're full of guilt. And the problem with that is when we keep that in, that guilt, that shame just festers. And it doesn't make us feel better about ourselves. We try and keep things secret and hidden. And I'm not talking about standing up on a stage and saying, hey, I'm Chris, my sin is whatever it is. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about having the courage to say to yourself, acknowledge it, and then walk away from it. Leave it. Whatever it is, you know what it is. If that's you, if you're stuck in this habit, this attitude, this rhythm, there's an endless list, because sin isn't about a bunch of rules. It's things that are damaging us or damaging other people, whether that's severe or minuscule, whatever it is. Have you got the courage to own it and do something bold? In a moment, I'm going to ask you that if that is you, to stand to your feet. And that's going to take courage, to stand and say, yeah, I'm a sinner. We're going to give you a badge. You can write, no, we're not going to do that at all. But it's courage just to actually stand before yourself, before God, and perhaps before the people who care about you most, if they're sitting next to you. And just say, yeah, there's something in my life. There's an attitude, there's a habit, there's an action that I need to walk away from. It's going to take 10 seconds of courage. And stand before God, and then faithfully follow Jesus out of it. Put things in place, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. There's people you can talk to or stuff. I'd love to have a conversation with you if that would be helpful. Put things in place that will help you leave your sin. And then, after we've done that, I'm going to ask anybody who's ever had to leave a sin to stand to your feet. And by the way, I'm already standing. There's many moments in my life where I recognize an attitude or a habit or an action or a thought that I need to leave because it's not good for me or it's not good for the people around me. And I'd be standing multiple times. So if you're ready to do that, and you've got the courage to do that, to leave your sin, stand. Thank you. Stand because other people are standing. We're going to do this because you recognize there's something that you need to leave. Thank you. And if you've ever had to leave a sin, stand. Let's pray together. Father God, we stand before you. as people who recognize we've got it wrong. We've done things which we know we shouldn't have done. We've said things we know we shouldn't have said. Thank you that in you, there's no condemnation, but there's grace, that there's forgiveness, there's hope, and there's healing. And I pray that you'd help us be healed. For those of us who need to turn our backs on an action or an attitude, a habit, a relationship, whatever it is, give us the courage to follow you out of our sin, to put things in place, to talk to somebody if we need to talk to somebody, to do something if we need to do something. Give us the courage to leave our sin. And Lord, we recognize that we'll still get it wrong. We'll still make mistakes. We'll still mess up. But I thank you that we can come back to you each time and just say, I'm sorry. Help me. Help me to faithfully follow you and be the person that you created me to be. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. The band are going to lead us through a song. Let's just stay standing. If you're not standing yet, why don't you stand to your feet?